The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Queen Zephyra's scaled hand slammed against the crystalline podium. Her serpentine form towered over the assembled delegates, each representing different species from across the known universe. The Vorthak Empire, the Silicon Collective, the gaseous minds of Altair, all had come to witness what they believed would be humanity's final judgment. Captain Sarah Chen stood alone in the center of the vast chamber, her blue uniform a stark contrast against the alien architecture that surrounded her, the weight of representing her entire species pressed down on her shoulders. But she kept her chin raised and her eyes steady. Behind her, holographic displays showed the devastation that had brought them all here. Entire star systems cleansed of hostile alien forces, impossible military victories and technologies that defied conventional understanding. "You stand accused," Queen Zephyra began, her voice echoing through the chamber's bioacoustic amplifiers, "of systematic genocide, unauthorized territorial expansion, and the development of weapons that violate the galactic accords of peaceful coexistence." The accusations hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah had heard them all before during the preliminary hearings, but hearing them spoken by the most ancient being in known space carried a different weight. Zephyra had lived for over 10,000 Earth years, had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and was considered the closest thing to a universal authority that existed. "Your species," continued the Queen, "has shown unprecedented aggression in the mere 2 centuries since achieving faster-than-light travel. You have conquered territory belonging to 17 different species, eliminated what you call threats to humanity, with disturbing efficiency, and developed weapons that even we dare not create." Sarah finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber despite its vastness. "Your Honor, everything humanity has done has been in self-defense. When we first reached the stars, we were attacked without provocation. We lost entire colonies to species that saw us as nothing more than resources to be harvested." A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. The Kythera ambassador, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as disagreement. "The humans lie," it transmitted. "They seek to justify their warmongering with tales of victimhood." Queen Zephyra raised a hand for silence, her ancient eyes black as the void between stars, fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made the human captain feel as though her soul was being examined. "Tell me, human, do you know where your species came from?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "We evolved on Earth, Your Honor, from earlier primates over millions of years. And before that?" Sarah hesitated. The question seemed to have deeper implications than simple evolutionary biology. "Before that, we assume our ancestors were simpler life forms, eventually tracing back to the first organic compounds that achieved self-replication." Queen Zephyra's lips, if they could be called lips on her reptilian face, curved into what might have been a smile. It was not a pleasant expression. "You assume, but you do not know." The chamber's atmosphere seemed to thicken. Sarah noticed that several of the alien delegates were shifting uncomfortably, as if they knew something she didn't. The feeling of walking into a trap settled in her stomach like a cold stone. "No species in this galaxy," Zephyra continued, "develops faster than light travel in less than 10,000 years of civilization. No species creates weapons capable of cracking planets without first developing the wisdom to restrain themselves. No species shows the particular combination of creativity, aggression, and adaptability that humans possess." Sarah's mouth felt dry. "What are you saying?" "I am saying, young human, that your species did not evolve naturally on Earth." Zephyra's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but the chamber's acoustics carried every word to every corner. "I am saying that someone placed you there. Someone engineered you. Someone created you to be exactly what you have become." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If humanity was artificially created, it explained so much. Their rapid technological development, their ability to adapt to any environment, their seemingly instinctive understanding of warfare and strategy that had allowed them to survive first contact with hostile alien species. "Who?" Sarah managed to whisper. Queen Zephyra stepped down from her podium, her massive form moving with surprising grace. As she approached Sarah, the human captain could see that the Queen's scales were not uniform in color. Some were darker, bearing what looked like ancient scars or markings that seemed to shift in the chamber's strange lighting. "That," Zephyra said, Now close enough that Sarah could feel the heat radiating from the alien's body, is where this story becomes complicated. The Queen turned to address the full assembly. Honored delegates, what I am about to reveal has been kept secret for over 100,000 of your years. It is knowledge that only the eldest of us possess, knowledge that we hoped would never need to be shared. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized she was about to learn something that would change everything humanity thought they knew about themselves. Long ago, Zephyra began, before most of your species achieved sentience, before most of your stars were born, there was a war. Not a war between species or even between galaxies, but a war between different ideas of what life should become. On one side were those who believed in peaceful coexistence in the slow evolution of consciousness and wisdom. On the other side were those who believed in strength, in the right of the powerful to take what they needed from the weak. The chamber was so quiet that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. The peaceful side won that war, but at a terrible cost. In our desperation to end the conflict, we created something that we thought would be our ultimate weapon against tyranny and aggression. We took the genetic material of the most adaptable, intelligent, and resourceful species we could find, and we enhanced it. We made it stronger, more creative, more resilient. We gave it an instinctive understanding of tactics and technology that would normally take millions of years to develop. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as understanding began to dawn. We created the perfect soldiers, Zephyra continued, her voice now heavy with what sounded like regret. And when the war ended, we realized we had a problem. What do you do with a species designed for conflict when there is no longer any conflict to be had? The Queen's ancient eyes fixed on Sarah once again. We hid you away on a remote planet, surrounded by systems we thought would keep you contained until you could learn to control your nature. We gave you myths and legends that would guide you toward wisdom and peace. We watched from afar, hoping that nurture could overcome nature, that environment could modify what we had written into your very genetic code. Sarah's knees felt weak. Everything made sense now. Humanity's rapid rise, their instinctive understanding of technology, their ability to adapt to any threat they encountered. But who? She asked again. Who created us? Queen Zephyra's expression became unreadable. When she spoke, her words shattered Sarah's understanding of everything she thought she knew about the universe and humanity's place in it. I created you, Queen Zephyra said, her voice barely audible yet carrying the weight of eons. I am your mother in every sense that matters. The words hit Sarah like a shockwave. Around the chamber, she could hear the surprised gasps and electronic chirps of the various alien delegates. Even they, it seemed, had not known this truth. Sarah staggered backward, her mind reeling. That's impossible. You're reptilian. We're mammalian. The genetic differences alone. Genetics, Zephyra said with something that might have been amusement, are merely information, and information can be rewritten by those with sufficient knowledge and power. She gestured with one clawed hand, and a holographic display materialized in the air between them. Behold your true origin story. The display showed a younger version of Queen Zephyra, though younger was relative when dealing with a being over 100 centuries old. This version of the Queen stood in what appeared to be a vast biological laboratory, surrounded by equipment that Sarah's enhanced human intellect could barely comprehend. 100,000 years ago, I was the chief geneticist for the alliance that fought against the Devourers, beings who consumed entire worlds not for sustenance, but for the pleasure of destruction. They had already eliminated 3 galaxies' worth of life. Nothing we threw at them could stop them. Our peaceful species, evolved over millions of years, simply could not match their capacity for violence. The hologram showed terrible battles, space fleets being torn apart by creatures that seemed to be made of living darkness, entire planets being consumed by expanding fields of nothingness that left only empty void behind. So I proposed the unthinkable, Zephyra continued. I would create a species that could match the Devourer's capacity for destruction, but coupled with the intelligence and adaptability needed to actually defeat them. I took genetic material from 12 different species, the creativity of the Altarians, the adaptability of the Vorthak, the tactical brilliance of the Centauri, the emotional depth of the empaths, and 8 others. Sarah watched as the hologram showed DNA helixes being twisted and modified, genetic sequences being written and rewritten with technology that seemed almost magical. But the most important component, Zephyra said, came from my own species. The Zarathi have one trait that no other species possesses. We can adapt our thinking to match any threat. When we face a peaceful opponent, we become diplomatic. When we face a warrior, we become strategic. When we face something that wants to destroy everything, her voice trailed off meaningfully. You become destroyers yourselves, Sarah whispered, understanding flooding through her. Precisely. And so I wove that trait into humanity's genetic code, but I made it stronger. Where we Zarathi can only mirror what we face, humans can exceed it. You don't just match your opponents, you surpass them. The hologram shifted, showing the first human settlements on Earth. But these weren't the primitive cave dwellers from human history books. These early humans were clearly advanced, using technology that seemed to blend seamlessly with their natural environment. I placed your ancestors on Earth and gave them everything they needed to grow and develop, Zephyra explained. I thought that with enough time and guidance, they would become the perfect balance of warrior and peacekeeper. I created legends and myths to guide them, established natural barriers to slow their expansion until they were ready, and watched from afar. Sarah felt a chill as she realized what the Queen was implying. The myths, the stories of gods and divine intervention, those were reports of my visits to monitor your progress filtered through primitive understanding and passed down through oral tradition, Zephyra confirmed. Your species' concept of divine beings who test mortals, who provide guidance and punishment in equal measure. Those stories exist because I was there, trying to shape your development. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates began arguing among themselves. Sarah heard fragments of conversation in a dozen different languages, but the general theme was clear. Outrage that such a dangerous species had been deliberately created and hidden from the galactic community. Silence. Zephyra's voice boomed, enhanced by technology that made it physically painful to ignore. The chamber fell quiet instantly. You will hear the full story before you pass judgment. She turned back to Sarah, and for the first time the human captain thought she saw something like emotion in those ancient eyes. For 50,000 years the plan worked. Humanity developed exactly as I hoped, growing stronger and more capable, but also more compassionate and wise. Your early civilizations showed remarkable restraint for beings with such aggressive potential. You developed art, philosophy, science. You created systems of law and justice. The holographic display showed human civilizations that Sarah didn't recognize from any history book. Advanced societies that seemed to have mastered both technology and social cooperation. But then something went wrong, Zephyra continued, and her voice carried a weight of regret that seemed to press down on everyone in the chamber. The genetic modifications I had made were more complex than I realized. The warrior traits I had embedded didn't just affect your ability to fight external threats, they also made you fight among yourselves. Kuro watched in horror as the hologram showed human societies tearing themselves apart in conflicts that made their recorded history look peaceful by comparison. Cities burned. Continents were scarred by weapons that turned the very ground toxic, and entire populations disappeared into the chaos of wars that seemed to have no purpose beyond destruction. I tried to intervene, Zephyra said. I sent guidance through individuals your species would later call prophets and teachers. I tried to steer you back toward the path I had originally intended. But every time I succeeded in ending one conflict, two more would spring up in its place. The display showed the aftermath of these ancient wars, a planet scarred almost beyond recognition, with only scattered groups of humans surviving in primitive conditions. So I made the hardest decision of my long life. Zephyra continued. I wiped most of your civilization away and forced your species to start over from nearly nothing. I removed the technology that was allowing you to destroy yourselves, scattered the survivors across your planet, and hoped that having to rebuild from nothing would teach you the value of cooperation. Sarah's mouth fell open. The Great Flood, the destruction of Atlantis, the collapse of ancient civilizations. Those weren't natural disasters. They were interventions, Zephyra confirmed. Desperate attempts to reset a species that was consuming itself with its own power. And for a while it seemed to work. Your species rebuilt, but more slowly and carefully. You developed wisdom traditions that emphasized peace and cooperation. You created religions that taught restraint and compassion. The Queen's expression darkened. But I had underestimated how deeply the warrior nature was embedded in your genetic code. It emerged again and again, in smaller conflicts at first, then larger ones. Your species seemed incapable of existing without some form of conflict to drive it forward. Sarah thought about human history, the endless succession of wars, the way humanity seemed to define itself through struggle against external opponents. So you decided to give us external opponents. I guided your development toward space travel, Zephyra confirmed. I hoped that if I could direct your aggressive instincts outward, toward exploration and expansion rather than internal conflict, you might finally achieve the balance I had originally intended. The holographic display shifted to show the early human space program. But Sarah could now see subtle signs of alien influence, technologies that developed faster than they should have, discoveries that seemed to come from nowhere, intuitive leaps that pushed humanity toward the stars decades ahead of schedule. And then, Zephyra said, you encountered the Krell Syndicate. Sarah's face hardened at the mention of humanity's first alien contact. The Krell had attacked human colonies without warning or provocation, treating humans like livestock to be harvested for biological experimentation. I had not intended for first contact to be violent, Zephyra continued. I had arranged for you to meet the Altarians first. They are peaceful, wise, and would have welcomed humanity into the galactic community with proper guidance. But the Krell moved their territory and encountered your ships first, and when they attacked us, you became exactly what I had created you to be, Zephyra finished. Perfect soldiers facing an external threat with no constraints on your development. Within 50 years, you had not only defeated the Krell but absorbed their technology and used it to make yourselves even more dangerous. Sarah understood now why the galactic community feared humanity. They had watched a species go from primitive space travel to galaxy-spanning military power in less time than most species took to establish their first off-world colony. Every species you have encountered since then has fallen into the same pattern, Zephyra observed. They attack you, underestimating what you are capable of, and you destroy them so thoroughly that others think twice about making the same mistake. But we've never attacked anyone who didn't attack us first, Sarah protested. No, Zephyra agreed. That at least is something I managed to build into your genetic code successfully. Humans are incapable of true aggression without provocation. You are the ultimate defensive species, harmless until threatened, unstoppable once engaged. The Queen looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates, and Sarah could see fear in their alien features. Which brings us, Zephyra said, to why you are here today. The chamber's atmosphere grew heavy as Queen Zephyra's words sank in. Sarah could feel the eyes of every alien delegate fixed on her, and the weight of their combined fear was almost tangible. 3 months ago, Zephyra continued, our deep space monitoring stations detected something that we hoped we would never see again. The Devourers have returned. The holographic display shifted to show readings from various detection arrays scattered throughout the galaxy. Sarah's enhanced intellect, inherited from her engineered ancestors, immediately grasped the implications of what she was seeing. The energy signatures were unlike anything in recorded human history, but they radiated a wrongness that made her instincts scream danger. They consumed the Andromeda Galaxy completely during our last war, Zephyra explained. We thought we had destroyed them, or at least driven them so far away that they would never return. We were wrong. A delegate from the Silicon Collective, its crystalline form pulsing with agitated light patterns, transmitted a message that appeared as floating text above its position. Why are you telling the humans this? They are the threat we gathered to discuss. Zephyra's laugh was a sound like grinding stone. Because, honored delegate, the humans are not our problem. They are our solution, Sarah felt her heart stop. You want us to fight them. That's why you're revealing all this. The Devourers have spent the last 100,000 years growing stronger, Zephyra said. Our intelligence suggests they have consumed at least 5 galaxies since our last encounter. They have technologies now that we cannot comprehend, strategies that our peaceful species cannot counter. The hologram showed the edge of the galaxy, where stars were simply vanishing, not exploding, not collapsing, simply ceasing to exist as if they had never been there at all. Every species in this chamber represents billions of years of evolution toward cooperation and peace, Zephyra continued. We have created societies based on harmony, understanding, and mutual benefit. These are wonderful achievements, but they have made us vulnerable to something that exists purely to destroy. Sarah watched as the display showed various alien fleets attempting to engage with whatever was causing the stellar disappearances. The results were uniformly catastrophic, entire battle groups vanishing without trace, their final transmissions showing nothing but confusion and terror. We tried to fight them as we fought before, Zephyra admitted. But we are not the same species we were 100,000 years ago. We have grown soft, civilized. We have forgotten how to be truly ruthless when survival is at stake. The Vorthak ambassador, a being that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a tree, spoke in a voice like wind through leaves. So you would unleash the humans upon them? Do you truly believe they can succeed where we have failed? I do not believe it, Zephyra replied. I know it. Because I designed them specifically to fight the Devourers. Sarah's mind raced as she processed this revelation. Every aspect of human development, every trait that made humanity different from other species, had been intentionally crafted for this specific purpose. Their ability to adapt to any environment, their instinctive understanding of strategy and tactics, their capacity to develop new technologies at impossible speed, all of it had been preparation for a war that was only now beginning. The Devourers learn, Zephyra explained. Every species they encounter, every civilization they destroy, they absorb its knowledge and adapt to counter its strengths. But humans adapt faster than the Devourers can learn. Where other species take millennia to develop new strategies, humans can revolutionize their entire approach to warfare in a single generation. The holographic display showed human military development over the past 2 centuries. Sarah watched as her species went from chemically propelled bullets to plasma weapons, to something called gravitational disruptors that could collapse matter at the subatomic level. Moreover, Zephyra continued, humans have something that no other species possesses in sufficient quantity to matter: creative destructiveness. Other species, when they fight, rely on established patterns of warfare that can be predicted and countered. Humans fight like no other species in the galaxy. You are genuinely unpredictable. Sarah thought about the battles that had made humanity's reputation in galactic society. The Battle of Kepler 442, where human forces had won by weaponizing a star. The Siege of New Byzantium, where humans had somehow convinced an asteroid field to change its orbit and crush an enemy fleet. The incident at Proxima Station, where human engineers had literally turned a space station inside out to trap an invading force in a pocket dimension. But there's more, Zephyra said, and her tone made Sarah's blood run cold. The Devourers are not just destroyers. They are converters. Every species they encounter, they attempt to corrupt and turn into versions of themselves. They succeed with most species because most species, when faced with total destruction, will compromise their principles to survive. The Queen's ancient eyes fixed on Sarah with laser intensity. Humans will not compromise. When faced with extinction, your species becomes more human, not less. The Devourers cannot convert what they cannot understand, and they have never encountered a species that responds to the threat of death by becoming more dangerous rather than more desperate. Around the chamber, Sarah could see the alien delegates beginning to understand the implications. Humanity wasn't just a potential weapon against the Devourers. They were a weapon specifically designed to be immune to the enemy's primary method of expansion. How long do we have? Sarah asked, her military training taking over despite the emotional turmoil of learning her species' true origin. The Devourers will reach inhabited systems within 18 standard months, Zephyra replied. They are moving faster than they did during our previous war, suggesting they have developed new propulsion technologies. 18 months, Sarah repeated, to prepare for a war against beings that have consumed multiple galaxies. She paused, her mind already working through logistics and strategy. We'll need access to your historical records of the previous war, technical specifications of Devourer capabilities, psychological profiles, anything that might give us insight into their current methods. Already prepared, Zephyra said, and Sarah detected what might have been pride in the ancient being's voice. But there is something else you must understand. This war cannot be won by humanity alone. It will require the combined resources of every species in the galaxy, coordinated under a unified command structure. The chamber erupted in debate. Sarah caught fragments of arguments in various languages, but the general theme was clear. Many of the species represented here had spent generations fearing human expansion. and now they were being asked to put their entire civilizations under human military leadership. They will never agree to it, Sarah said, recognizing the political impossibility of what Zephyra was suggesting. They will, Zephyra replied with certainty, because the alternative is extinction. She gestured, and the holographic display showed a tactical analysis of the Devourer advance. The projections were clear. At their current rate of expansion, they would consume the entire galaxy within 50 standard years. The Devourers do not negotiate, Zephyra explained to the chamber. They do not take prisoners. They do not leave survivors. Every species they encounter faces the same choice: fight and die, or submit and become something that is no longer recognizably alive. The gaseous mind delegate, a swirling cloud of coherent plasma contained in a force field, pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as deep concern. Its thoughts appeared as text in the air. And you believe the humans can prevent this fate? I believe, Zephyra said, that the humans are the only species that stands a chance of preventing this fate, but only if they are given the resources and authority they need to wage this war effectively. Sarah felt the weight of species-wide responsibility settling on her shoulders. Every decision humanity made in the coming months would determine not just their own survival, but the survival of every intelligent species in the galaxy. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. Zephyra smiled that unpleasant reptilian smile again. I am proposing that this council formally recognize humanity as the supreme military authority for the galactic defense against the Devourers. I am proposing that every species contribute their full industrial and technological capacity to support human war efforts, and I am proposing that we give humanity access to technologies and weapons that we have kept hidden for 100,000 years. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just asking humanity to fight for them, they were asking humanity to become them, to take on the role of galactic protectors that other species had abdicated in favor of peaceful civilization. And if we refuse? Sarah asked. Zephyra's expression became unreadable. Then we all die together, and the Devourers move on to consume the next galaxy. Sarah looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates, seeing fear and hope warring in their alien features. She thought about Torres grimaced. That's where we're running into problems. The alien species are willing to follow human strategic command, but their tactical doctrines are completely incompatible with ours. The Vorthak Empire insists on maintaining rigid battle formations. The Silicon Collective wants to conduct warfare through mathematical algorithms. The gaseous minds think combat should be a form of artistic expression. Sarah sighed. This was the challenge she had anticipated from the beginning. Each alien species had developed their approach to warfare over millions of years of evolution, and none of them understood the kind of fluid, adaptive combat that had made humanity so effective. Any word from the advanced scouts? She asked. That's the other problem, Torres replied. We've lost contact with monitoring stations in the Cygnus sector. Whatever happened to them, it happened fast. No distress signals, no final transmissions. They just stopped. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Cygnus sector was 8 months away from the nearest inhabited system, which meant the Devourers were moving even faster than Queen Zephyra had predicted. Assemble the Command Council, she ordered. All species representatives, Priority Alpha. An hour later, Sarah stood before a holographic conference table that displayed the avatars of 47 different species military commanders. The sight should have been inspiring. The entire galaxy united in common cause. Instead, it looked like a diplomatic nightmare waiting to happen. The situation has changed, Sarah began without preamble. Our enemy is moving faster than anticipated. We need to accelerate all preparation timelines. The Vorthak Fleet Admiral, an insect-like being whose translator rendered his speech in clipped formal tones, immediately objected. Impossible. Our manufacturing protocols require specific temporal sequences. We cannot simply accelerate the production of our contribution to the fleet. Then we go without your contribution, Sarah replied bluntly. The statement caused an uproar among the assembled commanders. Sarah let it continue for exactly 30 seconds, then activated the chamber's silence field. I want to be absolutely clear about something, she said, her voice carrying the authority that had been formally invested in her by every government in the galaxy. This is not a debate. This is not a negotiation. This is a war council and I am the supreme commander of all galactic military forces. You can either contribute to our collective defense or you can be defended by others, but you will not slow down our preparations with bureaucratic procedures. Admiral Kethril of the Altarian fleet, a tall, graceful being with skin that seemed to shimmer with inner light, leaned forward. Admiral Chen, we understand the urgency, but our species have protocols in place for good reasons. We cannot simply abandon millions of years of military doctrine. Your military doctrine, Sarah replied, was developed for wars against other civilized species. The Devourers are not civilized. They are not rational. They cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred. They are a force of nature, and nature does not care about your protocols. She gestured, and the holographic display showed the most recent intelligence from the Cygnus sector. These monitoring stations were equipped with the most advanced early warning systems available to galactic civilization. They were designed to detect any approaching threat weeks in advance and transmit detailed intelligence back to command. Instead, they simply ceased to exist in a time frame measured in minutes. The assembled commanders studied the data, and Sarah could see the implications dawning on them. Whatever had destroyed the monitoring stations had done so with casual ease, suggesting that the Devourer's capabilities had grown far beyond what the historical records indicated. This is why human military command is necessary, Sarah continued. Your species have evolved to fight wars where both sides follow established rules. Humans evolved to fight wars where the only rule is survival. We adapt our tactics to match our enemy's capabilities, not our own preferences. Commander Vex of the Crystalline Collective, a being made of living gemstone that communicated through harmonic vibrations, chimed a complex sequence that the translators rendered as, "Then what do you propose, Admiral Chen?" Sarah smiled grimly. "I propose we stop thinking like civilized beings and start thinking like predators." She manipulated the holographic display, showing a tactical overview of the galaxy. "Every species here has contributed ships and technology to this fleet. But you've all contributed based on what you think a proper military force should look like. Organized, disciplined, predictable." The display shifted, highlighting specific ship formations and weapon configurations. The Devourers have been fighting for 100,000 years. They know how civilized species wage war. They've adapted to counter everything we traditionally consider good military practice. "So what are you suggesting?" asked Admiral Thane of the Terran Defense Force, one of the few humans in the command structure. "I'm suggesting we throw out the rulebook," Sarah replied. "Forget formation fighting. Forget coordinated battle plans. Forget everything you think you know about how space combat should work." She gestured again, and the display showed a new tactical formation, one that looked more like a three-dimensional cloud than a traditional battle fleet. "We're going to fight like humans fight," she announced. "Like we fought the Krell and the Hegemony and every other species that made the mistake of underestimating us. We're going to be unpredictable, adaptive, and completely ruthless." The alien commanders exchanged glances, and Sarah could see the concern in their various forms of expression. Admiral Kethril said carefully, "What exactly does that mean in practical terms?" Sarah's smile became predatory. "It means we're going to use every dirty trick, every unethical tactic, and every weapon that your species have spent millennia trying to forget. Because the Devourers aren't going to show us any mercy, and we can't afford to show them any either." She highlighted specific sections of the fleet formation. "Vorthak ships will be our heavy assault units, but instead of fighting in formation, they'll operate as individual hunters. Silicon Collective vessels will serve as our intelligence network, but instead of following mathematical algorithms, they'll learn to think like predators. Gaseous mine ships will provide support, but their artistic approach to combat will be channeled into psychological warfare." "And human ships?" asked Admiral Thane. "Human ships," Sarah replied, "will do what we've always done. We'll find the enemy's weakest point and hit it harder than they think is possible." The display shifted to show projected battle scenarios, each one more chaotic and unpredictable than traditional space combat doctrine would suggest. "The key to defeating the Devourers," Sarah explained, "is not to fight them the way they expect to be fought. Every species they've encountered has tried to match their strength with strength, their organization with organization. That's why those species lost." "But surely," protested Commander Vex, "some degree of coordination is necessary for effective fleet operations." "Coordination, yes," Sarah agreed. but not the kind of coordination that can be predicted and countered. We need to be coordinated like a pack of wolves, not like a marching army. She manipulated the display again, showing how the various ship types would interact in combat. Each species' ships will operate according to their strengths, but within a framework that emphasizes adaptability over predictability. When we encounter the Devourers, we want them to think they understand what we're doing right up until the moment we do something completely different. Admiral Kethril looked troubled. Admiral Chen, what you're describing sounds dangerously close to the kind of warfare that the Galactic Accords were designed to prevent. The Galactic Accords, Sarah replied, were written by civilized beings for wars between civilized beings. The Devourers are not civilized. They are an existential threat to every form of life in the galaxy. We either adapt our methods to match the threat we're facing or we die according to our principles. The chamber fell silent as the alien commanders absorbed the implications of what Sarah was proposing. They were being asked to abandon the ethical frameworks that had guided their species for millennia. I know this is difficult, Sarah said, her voice softening slightly. But you have to understand, this is what humans were designed for. This is why Queen Zephyra created us. We can do this because we were made to do this. She looked around the holographic conference table at the assembled faces of galactic military leadership. The question is whether you trust us enough to let us do what we were born to do. Admiral Thane was the first to speak. I'm in, Admiral. Humanity's survival depends on this as much as anyone else's. One by one, the alien commanders voiced their agreement, though Sarah could see the reluctance in many of their expressions. They were agreeing to follow her into a kind of warfare that violated everything they had been taught about civilized conflict. But as Sarah looked at the tactical displays showing the Devourers' approach, she knew they had no other choice. The real war was about to begin. The first contact with the Devourers came 6 months ahead of schedule, in the Kepler system where humanity had established one of their first extrasolar colonies. Admiral Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as the space around Kepler 442b simply changed. Report, she ordered, though her enhanced senses were already processing the impossible readings flooding in from every sensor array. Admiral, came the shaken voice of Lieutenant Commander Park from the sensor station. I'm reading massive spatial distortions throughout the system. It's like space itself is being rewritten. On the main display, Sarah watched as the star Kepler 442 began to flicker, not dimming or brightening like a normal stellar event, but actually flickering between existence and non-existence, as if something was deciding whether or not to allow it to continue being real. All ships, battle stations, Sarah commanded, her voice carrying across the combined fleet of 47 species. This is not a drill. The enemy has arrived. Around her, the bridge of the Indomitable transformed into a hub of controlled chaos. Officers from a dozen different species worked side by side at control stations that had been modified to accommodate various alien physiologies. It was a scene that would have been impossible just months earlier, but necessity had forced rapid adaptation. Admiral, reported Commander Torres, we're receiving transmissions from the colony on 442b. They're reporting that some of their people are disappearing. Disappearing how? Not dying, Admiral. Actually ceasing to have ever existed. Their records are being rewritten in real time to show that missing colonists were never born. Sarah felt ice form in her veins. This was worse than the historical records had indicated. The Devourers weren't just killing people, they were erasing them from reality itself. Fleet Formation Chaos 7, she ordered. All ships implement hunt pack protocols immediately. The massive fleet, which had been traveling in a loose formation resembling traditional battle order, suddenly scattered like a school of fish avoiding a predator. Ships accelerated in seemingly random directions, their movements appearing chaotic to any outside observer, but actually following a complex pattern that Sarah's enhanced tactical mind could track perfectly. Contact, called Lieutenant Commander Park. Ships emerging from the spatial distortions. I count. Admiral, I can't get an accurate count. The sensors keep showing different numbers, Sarah understood. The Devourers weren't just bending space. They were existing in multiple probability states simultaneously, making traditional sensor readings impossible. Switch to human sensors only, she ordered. All alien ships, slave your targeting systems to human fire control. It was a radical command that went against every principle of fleet coordination, but Sarah knew that human sensor technology, developed through centuries of conflict, was specifically designed to track unpredictable targets. The main display cleared, showing the Devourer ships for the first time. They were unlike anything in the historical records. Where the ancient accounts described vessels of dark metal and angular design, these ships seemed to be made of something that wasn't quite matter. They shifted between dimensions, phases of existence that hurt to look at directly. "Admiral," came Queen Zephyra's voice over the communication channel, transmitted from her flagship, the ancient memory. "The Devourers have evolved beyond our previous encounters. They are not merely ships, they are holes in reality itself. Can we fight them?" Sarah asked, though she was already analyzing potential attack patterns. "You can," Zephyra replied, "because you are the one species that was designed to fight things that should not exist." Sarah nodded, understanding flowing through her enhanced consciousness. This was what she had been created for. Not just warfare, but warfare against the impossible. "All ships, implement Protocol Impossible," she commanded. It was a battle plan that had been developed specifically for fighting enemies that didn't follow normal rules of physics. Instead of trying to predict where Devourer ships would be, human crews would fire where they should be according to the laws of reality, forcing the enemy to choose between existing in normal space-time or maintaining their probability state advantages. The battle that followed defied every principle of space combat that had been developed over millions of years of galactic civilization. Human ships fired on empty space, forcing Devourer vessels to materialize or be hit by weapons that targeted their potential existence rather than their actual location. Alien ships following human targeting data found themselves engaging enemies that phased in and out of reality. "Direct hit on Devourer Vessel 7, reported Park. Admiral, it's screaming." Sarah could hear it too, a sound that bypassed the ears entirely and spoke directly to the primitive parts of the brain that recognized when something was fundamentally wrong with the universe. The Devourer ship they had hit was broadcasting its pain across multiple dimensions. "They can be hurt," Sarah observed with satisfaction. "All ships continue firing patterns. Don't let them stabilize their phase states." But the Devourers were adapting faster than expected. The ships that hadn't been hit began changing their attack patterns, shifting from their dimensional phasing to direct assault tactics that had been recorded in the historical files. "They're learning." Zephyra's voice came over the communication system. "They're adapting to your attack methods in real time." "Then we adapt faster," Sarah replied. She opened a channel to all human ships. All Terran vessels switched to pattern chaos, show them something they've never seen before. What happened next would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy, though most scholars would never fully understand it. The human ships began fighting, in a way that appeared completely random to outside observers, but was actually following a pattern based on human psychological warfare tactics developed during Earth's most brutal conflicts. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer ships, they began hurting them. Using precise fire patterns and movement algorithms that drew on humanity's experience hunting pack predators on Earth, the human fleet began corralling the enemy vessels into a region of space where they had prepared a surprise. "Now," Sarah commanded. The surprise was the planet Kepler 442c, which human engineers had spent the past month converting into a massive gravitational weapon. When activated, the planet's core began generating a cascading gravitational field that pulled everything in the surrounding space into a single point of reality. The Devourer ships, caught in multiple probability states, were suddenly forced to choose a single dimension of existence. For beings that had learned to exist partially outside normal spacetime, being locked into standard physics was apparently agonizing. "They're retreating," reported Torres, amazement in his voice. Sarah watched as the surviving Devourer ships began pulling back toward the edge of the system, their dimensional phasing becoming erratic as they tried to escape the gravitational weapon's effect. "Pursuit course," she ordered. "All ships maintain pressure. Don't let them regroup." The chase that followed took them to the edge of the Kepler system, where the Devourers made their final mistake. As they attempted to open what appeared to be some kind of dimensional gateway to escape, Sarah realized they were following a predictable pattern. "All ships, concentrate fire on the gateway formation," she commanded. "Target the space around the portal, not the portal itself." "Order." The combined fleet opened fire on empty space around the Devourer gateway, using the reality targeting techniques they had developed during the battle. The effect was immediate. The gateway collapsed, stranding the Devourer ships in normal spacetime. What followed was less a battle than an execution. Cut off from their dimensional advantages and locked into standard physics, the Devourer ships proved to be surprisingly fragile. Within an hour, the last enemy vessel had been destroyed. "System secure," reported Torres. "All Devourer ships destroyed or retreated." Sarah looked around the bridge at her mixed human and alien crew, seeing exhaustion and amazement in equal measure. They had just accomplished something that the historical record suggested was impossible. They had defeated a Devourer fleet in direct combat. "Casualties?" she asked. "Light losses across the fleet," Torres reported. "The alien ships performed better than expected once they adapted to human tactical coordination." Sarah nodded, but she wasn't celebrating yet. This had been a single engagement against what was probably a scouting force. The real Devourer fleet was still out there, and they would be analyzing this battle to develop countermeasures. "Send a full battle report to all fleet commanders," she ordered. "Emphasize that this was just the first round. The enemy will adapt, and we need to be ready to adapt faster." Queen Zephyra's voice came over the communication channel. "Admiral Chen, you have achieved something that we thought impossible. You have proven that the Devourers can be defeated." "We've proven they can be hurt," Sarah corrected. "Defeating them completely will require something more." "What do you mean?" Sarah looked at the tactical display, her enhanced mind already working through the implications of what they had learned. "The Devourers retreat when they take losses. That means they're not just mindless destroyers. They're intelligent, and intelligence means they have something to lose." "You're proposing to take the offensive," Zephyra observed. "I'm proposing to end this war," Sarah replied. "We've spent 100,000 years trying to defend against the Devourers. It's time to take the fight to them and find out what they're really protecting." Around the bridge, her officers exchanged glances. They were contemplating something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted, an aggressive campaign against an enemy that had consumed entire galaxies. But as Sarah looked at the debris field where the Devourer ships had died, she knew it was their only option. The battle for Kepler had proven that humanity could fight these ancient terrors and win. Now they needed to prove they could hunt them down and end them forever. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the holographic chamber aboard the Indomitable, staring at something that challenged every assumption about the universe she thought she knew. The image before her showed the heart of the Devourer territory, a region of space that shouldn't exist, where the normal laws of physics had been completely rewritten. "It's not just their ships," reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief scientist. "The entire region exists in a state of controlled reality collapse. They're not just using dimensional technology, they are dimensional technology." Sarah absorbed this information while studying the long-range sensor data that had cost them 12 reconnaissance ships to obtain. The Devourer home territory was a sphere of space approximately 50 light-years in diameter, where matter, energy, and time followed rules that human science couldn't even properly measure. "Admiral." Queen Zephyra's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to see the ancient being entering the chamber, her massive form moving with the careful grace of someone carrying the weight of millennia. "The Council has reached a decision regarding your proposed offensive." "Let me guess," Sarah said. "They think it's too dangerous." "They think it's impossible," Zephyra corrected. "Every species analysis of the sensor data concludes that sending ships into that region would be tantamount to sending them into a different universe entirely." Sarah looked back at the holographic display, her enhanced mind processing tactical possibilities that would have been beyond any naturally evolved human. "Maybe that's exactly what we need to do." The past 6 months had seen 17 more engagements with Devourer forces, each one teaching them more about their enemy. The Devourers weren't just conquerors or destroyers, they were refugees. Every piece of intelligence pointed to the same conclusion. They were fleeing from something even worse than themselves. "I've been analyzing the pattern of their attacks," Sarah explained. manipulating the holographic display to show the locations of all Devourer incursions. They're not trying to consume this galaxy for resources or territory. They're trying to transform it into something they can use as a fortress. Zephyra moved closer to examine the data. A fortress against what? That, Sarah said, is what we need to find out. She gestured, and the display shifted to show the intelligence they had gathered about the Devourer's origin point. According to your historical records, they originally came from the Galactic Core region. But when our scouts tried to investigate that area, they found something interesting. The hologram showed long-range sensor readings from the Galactic Core. Where there should have been the supermassive black hole that anchored their galaxy's structure, there was instead something that the sensors couldn't properly classify. It's not a black hole, Dr. Vasquez explained. It's not a neutron star. It's not any form of matter or energy that we can identify. It's something that exists in the same impossible state as the Devourer ships. Sarah nodded. I think the Devourers didn't originally choose to become what they are. I think they were transformed by contact with whatever that thing is at the Galactic Core. And you believe this changes our strategic approach how? Zephyra asked. Because if I'm right, Sarah replied, then the Devourers aren't our real enemy. They're just the first wave of something much worse, and they're as desperate to survive as we are. The implications hung in the chamber like a physical presence. If Sarah was correct, then the war they had been preparing to fight was just a prelude to something that threatened not just their galaxy, but the fundamental structure of reality itself. Show me your plan, Zephyra said finally. Sarah manipulated the holographic controls, displaying a tactical overview that made both women pause. We don't attack the Devourers, she said. We contact them. That's insane, Zephyra breathed. They don't communicate. They don't negotiate. They consume and transform. They don't communicate with species they see as food, Sarah corrected. But they might communicate with species they see as fellow predators. She gestured to display the battle records from their previous engagements. Look at the pattern. Every time we've fought them, they've adapted their tactics to match ours. That's not the behavior of mindless destroyers. That's the behavior of intelligent beings who recognize a threat. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we take a single ship into their territory, Sarah announced. Not to attack, but to demonstrate that we're not typical galactic civilization. We show them that we understand what they really are, and we offer them an alliance against whatever is really threatening this galaxy. Zephyra was quiet for a long moment, her ancient mind processing the implications. You're talking about the most dangerous diplomatic mission in galactic history. I'm talking about the only chance we have to prevent a war that will destroy everything, Sarah replied. Because if that thing at the Galactic Core is what I think it is, then fighting the Devourers is just delaying our extinction. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the shuttle bay of the Indomitable, preparing to board a specially modified human vessel called the Prometheus. The ship had been equipped with every piece of Devourer technology they had managed to salvage, along with human modifications that would allow it to exist partially in the same dimensional state as their enemies. Admiral, Commander Torres approached, his expression grim. The fleet commanders are united in their opinion that this mission is suicide. Probably, Sarah agreed, checking the environmental systems on her modified armor. But someone needs to make contact, and humans are the only species that might survive the attempt. Why? Torres asked. What makes us different? Sarah paused in her preparations, considering how to explain something that she was only beginning to understand herself. Every other species in the galaxy evolved toward civilization and peace. We evolved toward survival at any cost. If the Devourers are what I think they are, survivors who were transformed by something they encountered, then we might be the first species they've met that they can relate to. She sealed her helmet and moved toward the Prometheus. Besides, I need to know the truth. Queen Zephyra created humanity for a specific purpose, but I'm starting to think even she doesn't understand what that purpose really was. The flight into Devourer territory took 18 hours, during which reality became increasingly unstable around the Prometheus. Sarah watched through the ship's modified sensors as space itself began to behave according to rules that seemed more like mathematics than physics. Approaching the outer boundary, reported the ship's AI, its voice distorted by the dimensional effects. Detecting multiple Devourer vessels converging on our position. Open a communication channel, Sarah ordered. All frequencies, all dimensional phases. She took a deep breath and activated the transmission system. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Galactic Defense Force. I am requesting parley with the Devourer command structure. I believe we have a common enemy. For several minutes, there was nothing but static. Then gradually, a response began to filter through the communication array. It wasn't words or images, but something that spoke directly to the mind. "You are not prey," came the message, conveying concepts rather than language. "You are like us, changed, made into weapons." "Yes," Sarah replied, hoping her response was being translated correctly. "We were created to fight in a war that began before we existed. Just like you were. You know of the hunger?" Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature controls. The hunger. Even the concept being transmitted through the alien communication system carried overtones of absolute terror. "We know something is at the galactic core," she replied carefully. "Something that changes whatever it touches." "Not changes. Consumes. We were like your people once. Builders. Creators. Then the hunger touched our world, and we became what we are now. We have been running for eons, trying to build barriers, trying to find safety." Understanding flooded through Sarah's consciousness. The Devourers weren't conquerors at all. They were refugees desperately trying to create a fortress against something that existed beyond normal space-time. "Show me," she said. What happened next would forever change humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. The Devourer ships surrounded the Prometheus and began transmitting not just information, but actual memories. Experiences filtered through minds that had been fundamentally altered by contact with something that shouldn't exist. Sarah experienced the fall of the Devourer homeworld, watched as a creeping wave of absolute nothing consumed entire star systems, turning them into holes in reality itself. She felt the desperation of a species that had been forced to transform themselves into something barely alive, just to survive contact with an entity that consumed existence itself. The hunger grows stronger. The Devourer communication continued. Soon it will break free from the galactic core and consume all reality. We have been preparing this galaxy as a final fortress, but we are not strong enough alone. "What do you need from us?" Sarah asked. "You were designed to fight impossible wars. We have been fighting an impossible war for longer than your species has existed. Help us build a weapon that can kill something that is not truly alive." Sarah understood. This was why Queen Zephyra had really created humanity, not just to fight the Devourers, but to help them fight something far worse. A cosmic entity that existed at the intersection of multiple realities, feeding on the fundamental forces that held the universe together. "We'll help," she said. "But we do this together as allies," agreed. "But know this, the weapon we must build will require sacrifices from both our peoples. And even if we succeed, the universe that emerges from this war will not be the same one that entered it." As the Prometheus began its journey back to the galactic fleet, Sarah contemplated what she would tell the assembled species of the galaxy. They had thought they were preparing to fight for their survival. Instead, they were preparing to fight for the right of reality itself to continue existing. The real war, the war that would determine whether existence had meaning or whether everything would collapse into cosmic hunger, was about to begin. And humanity, the species created as weapons in a conflict they never understood, would finally fulfill their true purpose, not as destroyers, but as the universe's last hope for salvation. The stars themselves were watching to see if the children of Earth could save them all.